Dorothy Richardson's wrinkled finger froze above her iPad screen, the weekly bingo game forgotten as the viral video played before her clouded eyes. The 75-year-old woman's coffee cup slipped from trembling hands, ceramic shattering across the nursing home floor. It wasn't just any bear trapped in those massive python coils. It was her bear. "Sweet Jesus!" gasped Nurse Patricia from the doorway, her medication cart clattering as elderly residents wheeled closer to witness Dorothy's breakdown. Mrs. Henderson's knitting needles clattered to the floor. The common room fell silent except for the video's audio looping endlessly. Dorothy's mind flashed between the screen and a faded photograph tucked in her Bible. The same clearing, the same trees where she'd abandoned her son 50 years ago. Now her grandson was risking everything to save these creatures, and she'd watched in silence for too long. "Get me my phone!" Dorothy's voice cracked with desperate authority, tears streaming down weathered cheeks. Who was she to deserve this second chance? And how much time did any of them have left? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Dorothy Richardson had spent 75 years perfecting the art of regret, but nothing prepared her for watching her grandson's life crumble on the evening news 6 months earlier. David Richardson, head ranger of the Yellowstone region, stood before cameras explaining how budget cuts would force the closure of 3 wildlife sanctuaries. His hollow eyes reminded Dorothy of her own son, the boy she'd abandoned in this very park decades ago because she couldn't bear the poverty of a ranger's life. The irony wasn't lost on her. While David scraped together his ranger's salary to pay for his pending divorce and mounting debts totaling $180,000, Dorothy sat on a $2.5 million inheritance in the Sunset Manor nursing home, watching her family disintegrate from afar. She hadn't spoken to David in 3 years, not since their explosive argument over her late husband's funeral arrangements. Pride, she'd learned, was an expensive luxury. The other players in this tragic drama were equally broken. Marcus Webb, 52, haunted the park's periphery like a wounded animal. Once a passionate conservationist who'd worked alongside David for 15 years, Marcus had transformed into something darker after his 13-year-old son Tommy's accident. The bear attack 2 years prior had left Tommy wheelchair-bound and Marcus bankrupt from medical bills exceeding $800,000. Working 3 jobs, gas station attendant, night security guard, and weekend handyman, Marcus barely kept his head above water while watching his boy fade. Tommy Webb possessed the kind of spirit that should have been running through forests, not confined to wheels and hospital rooms. Despite his paralysis, the boy's love for animals never dimmed. He spent hours watching nature documentaries, memorizing animal behaviors, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian someday. His wall was covered with pictures of every species imaginable, including bears, the very creatures that had changed his life forever. Marcus couldn't understand his son's forgiveness, couldn't fathom how Tommy still spoke lovingly about wildlife while struggling to dress himself each morning. Deep in the park's restricted zones, 2 unlikely companions had formed an alliance that defied everything humans believed about predator relationships. Hope, a 2-year-old female black bear weighing nearly 200 pounds, possessed an intelligence that rangers had quietly documented but never publicly acknowledged. Her unusual behavior patterns suggested cognitive abilities far beyond typical bear development. Guardian, a 15-foot Burmese python who'd escaped from an illegal exotic animal transport 6 months earlier, had somehow survived Montana's harsh climate through sheer determination and an inexplicable partnership with hope. Wildlife cameras had captured glimpses of their interactions, the massive snake coiled around the bear during cold nights, the bear sharing kill sites with her unlikely protector. Biologists whispered about the phenomenon but couldn't explain it. The small town of Pine Ridge, population 1,200, depended entirely on tourism revenue from the park system. Local businesses faced bankruptcy as visitor numbers dropped 30% due to safety concerns and budget restrictions. The community that had once celebrated David's promotion now blamed him for their economic struggles, not understanding that his hands were tied by federal funding cuts and political indifference. The lightning struck at 11:47 p.m. on February 10th, igniting the driest winter in Yellowstone's recorded history. Within minutes, winds gusting at 60 miles per hour transformed a single burning pine into an inferno that would consume 80,000 acres and change 4 lives forever. David Richardson was pulling a double shift at the ranger station when the first emergency calls flooded in, his radio crackling with reports of flames jumping the Lamar River. Bella, an 8-year-old black bear weighing 280 pounds, had been teaching her 18-month-old cub Hope the final lessons of winter survival when the wall of orange death approached their territory. Mother bears possess an instinctual understanding of fire behavior, knowing exactly which direction to flee for safety. Bella should have grabbed Hope and run toward the northern ridge where rocky outcroppings would provide shelter. Instead, she made a choice that would haunt everyone who later learned the truth. Guardian lay pinned beneath a fallen Douglas fir, the massive tree having crashed across his midsection during the initial lightning strike. The python had been hunting near Bella's territory for weeks, an unusual arrangement that local wildlife cameras had captured but never fully documented. Unlike the aggressive territorial behavior typical of both species, Bella and Guardian had developed an understanding, sharing hunting grounds and even providing mutual warning signals about human presence. Sarah Chen, a 22-year-old park volunteer completing her wildlife biology degree, was documenting nocturnal animal behavior from a research blind when the fire erupted. Her night vision camera captured everything. Bella's moment of decision as she stood between her cub and the trapped python, the orange glow reflecting in her dark eyes as she calculated distances and time. The fire was moving at 40 miles per hour. She had perhaps 3 minutes to save both Hope and Guardian, or 5 minutes to guarantee her cub's survival alone. Bella chose love over logic. The massive bear began digging frantically around Guardian's trapped body, her powerful claws scraping against stone and root while Hope whimpered in confusion. Every second spent rescuing the python reduced their chances of reaching safety, but Bella continued digging with desperate determination. Sarah's camera recorded the moment Guardian's eyes met Bella's. An impossible communication between species that seemed to convey gratitude and urgency. When the tree finally shifted enough for Guardian to pull free, his body was lacerated and one section of vertebrae severely damaged. He could barely move, certainly couldn't travel at the speed necessary to outrun the advancing flames. Again, Bella faced an impossible choice. She could carry Hope to safety, or she could somehow transport a 15-foot python who weighed nearly as much as herself. She couldn't do both. The solution came from Hope herself. The young bear, demonstrating intelligence that would later astound animal behaviorists, positioned herself between Guardian's coils and began walking toward the only nearby shelter, a shallow cave system approximately 200 yards away. Guardian, understanding the plan, wrapped himself carefully around Hope's torso, not to constrict, but to hold on. Bella took the rear position, using her body to shield both of them from the approaching inferno. They almost made it. The cave entrance was visible, perhaps 50 yards away, when a burning pine exploded like a bomb, sending flaming debris in all directions. A massive branch, still blazing, struck Bella across her back and shoulders. The smell of burning fur filled the air as she stumbled, then forced herself back up. Hope turned to help her mother, but Bella's final act was to push her cub and guardian into the cave entrance with the last of her strength. Sarah Chen's footage captured Bella's final moments, the bear mother standing guard at the cave entrance even as flames consumed her fur, buying precious seconds for her unlikely family to crawl deeper into safety. Her final sound wasn't a roar of pain, but something softer, almost like the huffing noise mother bears make when reassuring their cubs. Then the smoke obscured everything. Inside the cave, Hope pressed against Guardian's wounded body as temperatures outside exceeded 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The python, despite his injuries, coiled protectively around the young bear as burning embers drifted through the cave entrance. Neither animal understood what they had witnessed, but both seemed to recognize that they were now responsible for each other's survival. David found them 36 hours later when the fires had finally been contained. His first glimpse through the cave entrance revealed what appeared to be a python strangling a young bear. Exactly the scene that would later be misinterpreted by media outlets worldwide. The discovery of Bella's charred remains at the cave mouth, positioned as if she had died protecting the entrance, suggested a different story entirely. But David, exhausted from fighting fires and coordinating evacuations, saw only what his training taught him to expect: a predator and prey in a death struggle. His immediate call for backup to neutralize the python threat set in motion a series of misunderstandings that would persist for months, until a viral video forced everyone to question what they thought they knew about love, sacrifice, and the bonds that transcend species. The fire was eventually ruled the most destructive in park history, claiming 80,000 acres, 17 structures, and one bear who chose love over survival. But it also forged an alliance that would soon capture the world's attention and reunite a fractured family in ways none of them could imagine. Dorothy Richardson's gnarled fingers shook as she dialed her grandson's number for the first time in 3 years. The viral video on her iPad showed 847,000 views and climbing, each share adding to her growing panic. She recognized that clearing in the background, Devil's Canyon, where she'd first met her husband in 1968, where she'd abandoned her son in 1973, where her family's story began and nearly ended. Now David was there, and she could see disaster approaching like a slow-motion train wreck. The phone rang 4 times before David's exhausted voice answered. "Richardson here." "David, honey, it's your grandmother." The words stuck in her throat like broken glass. 3 years of silence stretched between them, filled with accusations about money, family obligations, and the funeral arrangements that had torn them apart. "Grandma Dorothy?" David's voice shifted from professional to bewildered. "How did you... Why are you calling?" "That video, sugar." "I've been watching it, and I know that place. That's Devil's Canyon, ain't it?" Dorothy gripped the phone with both hands, her arthritic joints protesting. "You're fixing to do something dangerous, and I can't sit here watching my family fall apart again." David was silent for several heartbeats. In the background, Dorothy could hear radio chatter, engines, the organized chaos of a rescue operation preparing to deploy. "Grandma, I can't talk right now. We've got a situation here that requires—" "That python ain't hurting that bear, is it?" Dorothy interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of 7 decades. "You watch that video again, grandson. Really watch it. That snake's protecting something, not attacking it." Meanwhile, 40 miles away, in his cramped apartment above Pete's hardware store, Marcus Webb was loading tranquilizer darts and calculating distances. Tommy sat in his wheelchair beside the kitchen table, watching his father prepare equipment with growing alarm. The boy had learned to read his father's moods over the past 2 years, and tonight, Marcus radiated a dangerous combination of desperation and determination. "Dad, what are you doing?" Tommy's voice cracked with adolescent uncertainty. His medical bills from the latest round of physical therapy totaled $23,000, money they didn't have. Marcus had been working 18-hour days for months, but they were still drowning in debt. "Opportunity, son. That python's worth more money than I'll make in 5 years." Marcus didn't look up from his rifle scope calibration. "Victor Kozlov runs an exotic animal operation out of Nevada. He's offering $200,000 for that snake, no questions asked." "But Dad, that's illegal. And what about the bear?" Tommy wheeled closer, his young face etched with concern. "You taught me that animals deserve protection, remember? You used to say—" "That was before." Marcus's voice turned hard as granite. "Before a bear took your legs. Before your mother left because she couldn't handle having a disabled son. Before I realized that being a good person don't pay for medical bills or keep food on the table." Tommy fell silent, but his eyes never left his father's face. The boy who'd once dreamed of becoming a veterinarian now watched his hero transform into something unrecognizable. In Tommy's bedroom, animal posters still covered every wall: bears, wolves, eagles, a shrine to the dreams that medical reality had crushed. Jake Morrison, David's second in command, was having his own moral crisis in the park's equipment shed. His gambling debts to the Lakota casino had reached $85,000, and the collection calls were escalating to physical threats. When Marcus Webb approached him with a proposition, inside information about the rescue operation in exchange for $50,000, Jake saw it as divine intervention. "All I need to know is your approach route and timing," Marcus had explained 2 days earlier. "I'm not going to hurt your people. I just need a clean shot at that python before you get there." Now, as Jake loaded GPS coordinates into the department's tracking system, his conscience warred with his desperation. He thought about his wife Linda, who still didn't know about the gambling, about their 2 young daughters who trusted their daddy to keep them safe. One small betrayal could solve everything, or destroy what remained of his integrity. Dorothy's phone call had shaken David more than he cared to admit. His grandmother's voice brought back memories of summer visits to her house before his father died, before family feuds and financial pressures poisoned everything. She'd sounded frail but alert, and her observation about the video troubled him. David pulled up the footage again on his laptop, watching frame by frame as the python's coils encircled the bear. His trained eye began noticing details he'd missed during the first adrenaline-fueled viewing. The bear wasn't struggling. Its body language suggested comfort, even trust. And there, in the background, movement in the brush that looked like wolves circling, maintaining distance. Could his grandmother be right? Was this protection, not predation? Dr. Sarah Chen arrived at the staging area with additional equipment and a disturbing discovery. She'd been analyzing the original fire footage from 6 months ago, frame by frame, and found something that changed everything. Her laptop showed the final moments of the mother bear Bella's life, but from an angle that revealed the full story. "David, you need to see this," Sarah said, her voice tight with emotion. She pulled up the enhanced footage on her laptop. Bella didn't die in the fire by accident. She deliberately stayed at that cave entrance, blocking it with her body to protect what was inside. And look at this. She was pushing the python and her cub together like she was arranging something. David studied the footage, his worldview shifting with each frame. The mother bear's final act wasn't just sacrifice. It was a deliberate choice to place her cub under the python's protection. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "They've been together for 6 months. That python's been raising her cub." The implications hit him like a physical blow. They weren't dealing with a predator-prey situation that needed resolution. They were looking at a family unit, forged in tragedy and sustained by something that transcended species boundaries. Every intervention they'd planned suddenly seemed like a violation rather than a rescue. As teams prepared to move out, Dorothy's words echoed in David's mind. That snake's protecting something, not attacking it. The viral video had shown the world what appeared to be a dramatic wildlife conflict. But the truth was far more complex and beautiful. Now, David faced an impossible choice: follow protocol and separate the animals, or trust his grandmother's intuition and risk his career on a leap of faith. The sun was setting over Devil's Canyon as three separate forces converged on the location where two unlikely companions waited, unaware that their bond had already touched millions of hearts and was about to test the limits of human understanding about love, family, and the courage required to do what's right rather than what's expected. The convergence at Devil's Canyon began before dawn on August 19th, with three groups approaching the site from different directions, each carrying their own agenda and unaware of the other's presence. David Richardson's official rescue team assembled at the North Ridge staging area at 4:30 a.m., their equipment including thermal imaging cameras, tranquilizer rifles, and protective gear designed for handling large predators. The viral video had now reached 3.2 million views, and media helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures, their searchlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Dorothy Richardson's arrival at the scene defied every protocol in the Park Service Manual. Against all medical advice and nursing home regulations, the 75-year-old woman had convinced her night shift nurse, Patricia Martinez, to drive her to the canyon in the facility's medical transport van. Dorothy sat in her wheelchair on the canyon's south overlook, wrapped in her late husband's military blanket, her clouded eyes fixed on the clearing below where her family's destiny was being written. "Mrs. Richardson, we really should go back," Patricia pleaded, checking her watch nervously. "If the administrators find out I brought you here without authorization, I'll lose my job." "Honey, some things are more important than jobs," Dorothy replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd lived through 7 decades of hard choices. "My grandson's down there making the biggest mistake of his life, and I ain't gonna let pride stop me from helping him see the truth." From his concealed position on the eastern ridge, Marcus Webb adjusted his rifle scope one final time, his crosshairs centered on the clearing where Hope and Guardian had taken shelter. His hands, steady from years of hunting experience, trembled slightly as he thought about Tommy back home, probably awake early as usual, doing his physical therapy exercises with quiet determination. The boy had no idea his father was about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. Marcus's earpiece crackled with Jake Morrison's voice providing real-time intelligence on David's team movements. "Alpha Team is 60 yards from target location, moving southeast along the creek bed. You've got maybe 10 minutes before they're in position." The weight of betrayal sat heavy on Marcus's chest, but the promise of $200,000 from Victor Kozlov's exotic animal operation provided powerful motivation. Tommy's upcoming surgery to implant experimental nerve stimulators could restore partial mobility to his legs, but insurance had denied coverage, calling it investigational. The procedure would cost $180,000, money that might as well have been on the moon for a man working 3 minimum-wage jobs. In the clearing below, Hope and Guardian sensed the approaching humans long before any of the rescue teams realized how close they were. The young bear, now weighing nearly 250 pounds but still exhibiting juvenile behaviors around her python companion, pressed against Guardian's coiled body with obvious distress. The massive snake, his scales bearing faint scars from the fire 6 months earlier, raised his head to test the air with his forked tongue. The wolf pack that had originally triggered the viral video had returned, 6 adults and 4 juveniles moving through the underbrush with predatory patience. Alpha male Scar, recognizable by the distinctive claw marks across his muzzle from an encounter with a grizzly 2 years prior, had been tracking Hope for 3 days. The young bear represented enough meat to feed his pack for a week, but the python's presence had created an impasse. Wolves were intelligent enough to recognize that Guardian posed a lethal threat to any direct attack. Doctor. Sarah Chen crouched behind her observation blind, camera equipment recording everything as the drama unfolded. Her analysis of the original fire footage had revealed something extraordinary. Guardian's protective behavior toward Hope wasn't instinctual or accidental. The python had learned specific behaviors from watching Bella interact with her cub. He mimicked the mother bear's warning vocalizations, her protective positioning, even her method of gentle correction when Hope wandered too far from safety. "This is unprecedented," Sarah whispered into her recording device. "We're witnessing learned parental behavior across species lines. Guardian isn't just protecting Hope, he's actively parenting her using techniques he observed from her biological mother." David's team reached their final approach position just as the eastern sky began showing hints of dawn. Through his binoculars, David could see Hope and Guardian clearly for the first time since the viral video was shot. What he observed challenged everything he thought he understood about predator-prey relationships. The bear wasn't cowering in the python's coils. She was nestled against him like a child seeking comfort from a parent. "Team leader to all units," David spoke into his radio. "I'm seeing behavior inconsistent with our initial assessment. The bear appears calm and unrestrained. Recommend we observe for several more minutes before intervention." Jake Morrison's voice came back immediately, tinged with anxiety. "Sir, we've got media attention increasing by the hour. Command wants this resolved quickly and cleanly. The longer we wait, the more complicated this becomes." David didn't respond immediately. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. That snake's protecting something, not attacking it. Through his binoculars, he watched Hope nuzzle against Guardian's massive head, and the python responded by gently touching her snout with his own. It was a gesture of affection so unmistakable that David felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. The first shot came without warning. Marcus's rifle cracked across the canyon at 5:47 a.m. The bullet intended for Guardian's head, but thrown off target by an unexpected gust of wind. Instead of striking the python fatally, the shot creased his neck, drawing blood but causing no mortal damage. Guardian's reaction was immediate and protective. He coiled more tightly around Hope, not to constrict her but to shield her from whatever threat had emerged. Hope's roar of distress echoed across the canyon, a sound that triggered responses from every person present. David's team immediately began advancing, believing the bear was under attack. The wolf pack, startled by the gunshot, scattered temporarily but began regrouping in the northern tree line. Dorothy's voice rose above the chaos from her position on the overlook. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice carrying with surprising power across the canyon. "You're making it worse!" Marcus chambered another round, his hands now shaking visibly. He'd missed his clean shot, and Guardian's wound was bleeding but not life-threatening. The python would recover, making him worth less to Kozlov's operation. Desperation clouded Marcus's judgment as he adjusted his aim, trying to compensate for wind and distance while his target moved unpredictably. Tommy Webb chose that moment to emerge from the forest behind his father's position. The 13-year-old had spent 2 hours dragging himself up the rocky slope, using only his arms, his wheelchair abandoned at the trailhead below. His legs were useless, but his determination was absolute. Tommy had tracked his father using the GPS app on the phone Marcus thought was turned off, driven by an intuition that something terrible was about to happen. "Dad, don't." Tommy's voice was quiet but carried clearly in the mountain air. "Please don't become the monster," Marcus froze, his finger on the trigger, his son's voice cutting through layers of anger and desperation. He turned to see Tommy lying prone on the rocky outcropping, his legs twisted at unnatural angles, his young face streaked with tears and dirt from the climb. "Tommy, Jesus Christ, son, how did you—" "I know about Mr. Kozlov," Tommy said, his voice stronger now. "I heard your phone calls. I know about the money." The boy pulled himself closer, using his arms, his gaze never leaving his father's face. "That bear and that snake, they're family now, just like you and me are family. Would you sell me for $200,000? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked down at his rifle, then at Tommy's exhausted face, then across the canyon where Hope and Guardian remained locked in their protective embrace. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus saw clearly what he'd become, a man so consumed by anger and financial desperation that he was willing to destroy the very thing his son loved most. David's radio crackled with updates from his advancing team members. "Team 2 is 50 yards from target, requesting permission to deploy tranquilizers." "Negative," David replied, his binoculars still focused on the clearing. "Stand down and maintain observation positions. Something's not right about this whole situation." Jake Morrison's voice came back immediately, strained with barely controlled panic. "Sir, we have authorization from Regional Command to resolve this situation immediately. The media attention is becoming a liability." David ignored his second-in-command's urgency. Through his lenses, he watched Guardian carefully position himself between Hope and the direction from which the gunshot had originated. The python's body language showed no aggression toward the bear, only vigilant protection of something precious. Dorothy's wheelchair began moving down the rocky slope toward the clearing, Patricia Martinez running alongside trying to stop her elderly patient from attempting something impossibly dangerous. "Mrs. Richardson, please! You can't go down there." "Watch me," Dorothy replied grimly, her arthritis-twisted hands working the wheelchair's controls with surprising skill. "I've got 75 years of mistakes to make up for, and I ain't dying with this one on my conscience." The wolf pack chose that moment to make their move. Scar and 3 of his pack members emerged from the northern tree line, their approach coordinated and purposeful. They had been patient long enough, and the chaos among the humans provided perfect cover for their attack. Guardian sensed them immediately, his head swiveling toward the new threat while his body remained coiled protectively around Hope. Hope's response revealed the depth of her bond with Guardian. Instead of running or climbing a tree, typical bear responses to wolf threats, she positioned herself between the advancing wolves and Guardian's wounded section, using her body to protect her protector. The young bear's intelligence shone through as she vocalized in the specific pattern Guardian had taught her, a warning signal that sent the python's head into full defensive posture. Sarah Chen's camera captured everything as the multiple crises converged in the clearing. Her footage would later be analyzed by animal behaviorists worldwide, but in the moment she could only watch in amazement as Hope and Guardian demonstrated a level of interspecies cooperation that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal behavior. Marcus lowered his rifle, the weapon suddenly feeling impossibly heavy in his hands. Tommy had dragged himself across 10 feet of rocky ground to reach his father's side, and now the boy's small hand rested on the rifle barrel. "Dad, that python saved that bear the same way you saved me," Tommy said quietly. "When the doctor said I'd never walk again, you didn't give up. You fought for me every day. That's what love looks like, not perfect, but never giving up." Tears streaked down Marcus's weathered face as he looked at his son, then across the canyon at the embattled animals below. The parallel hit him with devastating clarity. Guardian was fighting the same fight Marcus had been fighting for 2 years, protecting something precious against impossible odds, refusing to abandon hope even when logic suggested surrender. David's voice cut across the radio chatter with sudden authority. All units, implement Plan Delta. We're not separating these animals. Repeat, we are not separating them. Our new mission is protection of the bonded pair from external threats. Jake Morrison's response came back immediately, thick with barely concealed panic. Sir, that's not authorized. Regional Command specifically ordered. I don't give a damn what Regional Command ordered, David replied, his voice carrying 3 generations of Richardson's stubbornness. I'm looking at something that my grandmother was smart enough to recognize and I was too proud to see. We're not breaking up a family today. The standoff in Devil's Canyon had become something none of the participants had anticipated. A moment of truth that would force each person to choose between what was expected and what was right, between following orders and following conscience, between the safety of the familiar and the courage required to believe in something extraordinary. As dawn light strengthened across the canyon, illuminating the clearing where Hope and Guardian faced their approaching threats, the real battle was just beginning. The wolves attacked at 6:23 a.m., just as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the mountain mist, casting long shadows across Devil's Canyon. Scar led the assault with the calculated precision of an apex predator, his pack moving in a coordinated pincer formation that would have overwhelmed any normal bear-python pairing. But Hope and Guardian were anything but normal. Guardian's response was immediate and devastating. The 15-foot python's body uncoiled with explosive speed, his massive head striking toward the lead wolf, while his tail section remained protectively wrapped around Hope's hindquarters. The snake's fangs, while not venomous, delivered crushing bite force that sent Scar tumbling backward with a yelp of pain and surprise. Blood streamed from puncture wounds in the wolf's shoulder, but the alpha regrouped quickly, his yellow eyes now burning with predatory rage. Hope's contribution to their defense revealed the depth of her intelligence and training. Rather than panicking or attempting to flee, the young bear rose to her full height and began the specific vocalization pattern that Guardian had taught her, a series of huffs and roars that mimicked adult bear warning signals. The sound echoed across the canyon with such authenticity that even David's experienced team mistook it for the approach of Hope's mother returning from the dead. From his position on the eastern ridge, Marcus Webb watched the battle unfold through his rifle scope, his hands trembling as Tommy's words echoed in his mind. The boy had managed to pull himself into a sitting position beside his father, his useless legs folded beneath him, his young face etched with determination and compassion that Marcus barely recognized. "Look at them fight together, Dad," Tommy whispered, his voice filled with awe. "They're not just surviving, they're protecting each other." That's what real family does. The second wave of wolves came from the south, 3 juveniles attempting to flank Guardian's position while he was engaged with Scar. Hope spotted the threat immediately and did something that would later be studied by animal behaviorists for decades. She deliberately positioned herself as bait, allowing the young wolves to approach within striking distance before Guardian's tail section whipped around with bone-crushing force, sending one juvenile flying into a boulder. Dorothy Richardson's wheelchair reached the canyon floor at precisely the wrong moment. The 75-year-old woman had maneuvered her way down a slope that would have challenged an experienced hiker, driven by a desperation that overrode common sense and physical limitations. Patricia Martinez had given up trying to stop her elderly patient and was now following behind, calling frantically into her cell phone for medical backup. "Get back, Grandma," David's voice boomed across the clearing as he spotted Dorothy's silver wheelchair emerging from the tree line. "It's not safe." But Dorothy had seen something that everyone else missed. Through her clouded eyes, she recognized the tactical formation the wolves were using, the same pattern she'd observed during her childhood in rural Montana when she'd watched her father defend their livestock from predator attacks. The wolves weren't randomly aggressive. They were desperate, driven by hunger, and the territorial pressures of a harsh summer that had decimated their usual prey base. "They're starving!" Dorothy called out, her voice carrying across the battlefield with surprising strength. "Look at their ribs! They ain't evil. They're desperate." Jake Morrison chose that moment to reveal his betrayal. The corrupt ranger emerged from his concealed position with his service weapon drawn, not aimed at the wolves, but at David's back. His gambling debts had finally reached the point where Viktor Kozlov's associates had made threats against his family, and Jake saw only one solution to his impossible situation. "Sorry, David," Jake called out, his voice thick with shame and desperation. "But I need that python alive, and I need you to step aside." David spun around, his own weapon coming up instinctively, but the momentary distraction proved costly. Scar, recognizing the divided attention of the humans, launched himself directly at Guardian's wounded neck, his powerful jaws seeking the vulnerable spot where Marcus's bullet had drawn first blood. Guardian's defensive response was magnificent and tragic. The massive python twisted his body to intercept Scar's attack, taking the wolf's fangs in his own flesh rather than allowing the predator to reach Hope. The snake's pain was evident in his writhing movements, but he never loosened his protective coil around the young bear. Hope's reaction to Guardian's injury triggered something primal in everyone watching. The young bear's roar of anguish wasn't the sound of a wild animal. It was the cry of a child watching her protector suffer. She began pawing at Guardian's wounded section with desperate gentleness, her behavior so unmistakably maternal that even the most hardened observers felt their hearts break. Tommy Webb made his decision in that moment. The 13-year-old boy began dragging himself down the rocky slope toward the battlefield, his arms straining against his body weight, his useless legs scraping against stones and thorns. Marcus reached for him, but Tommy twisted away with surprising agility. "No, Dad. If they're gonna die protecting each other, then I'm gonna die trying to save them." Tommy's voice cracked with adolescent determination and adult conviction. "You taught me that being disabled don't mean being useless." Marcus felt something break inside his chest, not his ribs or his heart, but the wall of anger and bitterness he'd built around his soul for 2 years. Watching his son display more courage in 30 seconds than Marcus had shown in 30 months stripped away every justification for his planned betrayal. The rifle fell from his hands as he scrambled after Tommy, no longer the embittered hunter but once again the father who would die before letting harm come to his child. The standoff between David and Jake escalated as the wolf battle raged in the background. Jake's service weapon shook in his grip, his training warring with his desperation and shame. "You don't understand, David. They'll kill my daughters. Linda doesn't even know about the gambling, and if I can't deliver that python to Kozlov's people, then we'll find another way," David replied firmly, his own weapon steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "But I won't let you destroy that bond between Hope and Guardian. My grandmother's right. What we're seeing down there is love, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let money corrupt it." Dr. Sarah Chen captured the moment that changed everything. Her camera recorded Guardian's final defensive strike against Scar, a blow that sent the alpha wolf retreating with his tail between his legs. But the effort cost Guardian dearly. Blood loss from multiple wounds was taking its toll, and the massive python's movements were becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. Hope's response revealed the depth of her emotional intelligence. The young bear began the specific comfort behavior she'd learned from watching her mother Bella. Gentle nuzzling, soft vocalizations, the careful positioning of her body to provide warmth and security. She was trying to parent Guardian the same way he'd been parenting her for 6 months. Dorothy's wheelchair somehow reached the edge of the battlefield, her presence causing a momentary pause in the violence. The elderly woman's voice rose above the chaos with the authority of someone who'd witnessed enough suffering for 10 lifetimes. "Enough!" she called out, her arthritic hands gripping her wheelchair arms with white-knuckled determination. "Jake Morrison, you put that gun down right now. Marcus Webb, you get down here and help your boy. David Richardson, you stop treating these creatures like a problem to solve and start seeing them as family to protect." The power in Dorothy's voice came from more than just age and authority. It carried the weight of 75 years of accumulated wisdom and regret. Everyone present, human and animal alike, seemed to recognize something fundamental in her tone. Even the remaining wolves paused their circling, sensing a change in the dynamics of the confrontation. Tommy reached the clearing first, his arms bloodied from dragging himself across rocky ground, his face streaked with tears and dirt but shining with determination. He positioned himself between Hope and the lingering wolves, a 13-year-old boy in a wheelchair facing down apex predators with nothing but courage and compassion. "It's okay," Tommy called to Hope and Guardian, his voice surprisingly steady. "We're not going to hurt you. We understand now." Hope's reaction to Tommy's presence was immediate and extraordinary. The young bear approached the disabled boy slowly, her massive head lowering until she was eye to eye with him. For a moment that stretched into eternity, bear and boy regarded each other with mutual recognition. Two young souls who'd learned to survive despite the odds, who understood that strength came from love rather than perfection. Guardian, despite his wounds and exhaustion, raised his head to assess this new human presence. Something in Tommy's scent or posture must have communicated safety, because the massive python slowly began to relax his defensive coiling, allowing Hope to move freely while maintaining protective proximity. Marcus reached his son's side moments later, his hunter's gear abandoned in favor of basic first aid supplies. Without hesitation, he began treating Guardian's wounds with the same careful attention he'd once given to injured wildlife during his conservation days. His hands, steady despite the emotional turmoil, worked with practiced efficiency to clean and bandage the python's injuries. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered, unsure whether he was apologizing to the animals, his son, or himself. "I forgot what I taught you about protecting the innocent." The wolves, sensing the shift in human dynamics and recognizing their disadvantage, began withdrawing to the tree line. Scar cast one final look at Hope and Guardian, his predatory instincts warring with pragmatic survival. The pack melted back into the forest, their hunger unsatisfied, but their territory clearly marked with the message that this particular clearing was under new protection. Jake Morrison's weapon wavered as he watched the scene unfold. The corrupt ranger found himself unable to maintain his threatening stance while witnessing Tommy's courage and Marcus's redemption. The gun slipped from his fingers as 2 years of shame and desperation caught up with him. "I can't do this," Jake sobbed, falling to his knees. "I can't destroy something beautiful just to save my own skin." David holstered his weapon and moved to Jake's side, his anger tempered by understanding. "We'll figure out the gambling debts, Jake. But first, we need to make sure these animals get the medical attention they need." Dr. Sarah Chin emerged from her observation blind with emergency veterinary supplies, her scientist's objectivity overwhelmed by the emotional reality of what she'd witnessed. As she began examining Guardian's wounds, Hope positioned herself to provide comfort and warmth, the young bear intuitively understanding her role as emotional support. The viral video that had started everything was now being live-streamed by news helicopters circling overhead, broadcasting the real-time resolution to over 6 million viewers worldwide. Comments flooded social media platforms as people watched authentic love triumph over manufactured conflict, their donations pouring into wildlife conservation funds faster than computers could process the transactions. Dorothy's wheelchair came to rest beside the unlikely family grouping of Tommy, Hope, Guardian, and Marcus. The elderly woman reached out with one trembling hand to touch Guardian's massive head, her clouded eyes bright with tears she'd been holding back for 3 years. "Well, "I'll be damned," she whispered, her voice carrying across the clearing to where David stood watching his fractured family begin to heal. Sometimes it takes a bear and a snake to teach humans what love really looks like. The sun had fully risen over Devil's Canyon, casting warm light across a battlefield that had become a reunion, a confrontation that had transformed into a moment of grace. The viral video that would eventually reach 50 million views worldwide had captured something unprecedented. Not just the bond between unlikely species, but the power of love to redeem even the most broken souls. The medical helicopter couldn't land in Devil's Canyon due to the rocky terrain, forcing Dr. Sarah Chen to work with limited supplies while Guardian's condition deteriorated rapidly. Blood loss from multiple wolf bites combined with his original bullet wound had weakened the massive python to the point where his protective coils around Hope were loosening involuntarily. Each labored breath sent ripples through his 15-foot body, and his usually alert eyes were becoming glassy with shock. Hope's distress intensified as she sensed Guardian's failing strength. The young bear began exhibiting behaviors that broke the hearts of everyone present. She tried to lift Guardian's massive head with her snout, made the soft huffing sounds that mother bears use to comfort their cubs, and positioned herself to share her body heat with his cooling scales. Tommy Webb, still seated on the rocky ground beside them, reached out with his small hand to stroke Hope's fur. "It's gonna be okay, girl," Tommy whispered, though his own voice trembled with doubt. "We're not gonna let him die. We're family now. And families don't give up on each other." Marcus Webb found himself facing the deepest irony of his life. The same hands that had been prepared to kill Guardian for money were now working desperately to save him. Marcus's conservation training from years past returned as he applied pressure to the python's wounds, his weathered fingers gentle despite their strength. The man who had blamed all bears for his son's accident was now kneeling in dirt and blood, fighting to preserve a bond between species that represented everything he'd forgotten about love. "Sarah, how bad is it?" David called out as he coordinated with the helicopter crew circling overhead. The medical team was preparing to airlift Guardian to the veterinary hospital at Montana State University, but the snake's size presented logistical challenges that no one had anticipated. "He's lost a lot of blood," Dr. Chen replied, her hands steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Python physiology is different from mammals. Their circulation is slower, but that also means they can survive longer with significant blood loss. If we can get him into surgery within the next 2 hours, he has a chance." Dorothy Richardson had positioned her wheelchair as close to the action as possible, her aged eyes taking in every detail of the drama unfolding around her. The woman who had abandoned her family 50 years ago was now witnessing its miraculous reunification, orchestrated by the unlikely friendship between a bear and a python. Her arthritic hands gripped her wheelchair arms as she fought waves of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her fragile heart. "David, honey," Dorothy called to her grandson, her voice carrying the weight of decades. "That snake's been more of a parent to that bear than I ever was to your daddy. Don't you let the bureaucrats separate them now." The bureaucrats Dorothy referenced were already mobilizing. Regional Park Director William Hayes was en route by helicopter, accompanied by federal wildlife officials who had been monitoring the viral video situation. Their preliminary orders were clear: separate the animals immediately, relocate the python to an accredited zoo, and place Hope in a rehabilitation facility. The unprecedented media attention had made this a political issue rather than a conservation decision. Jake Morrison sat hunched against a boulder, his ranger uniform torn and stained with tears and dirt. The weight of his betrayal pressed down on him like a physical force, made worse by witnessing the courage and sacrifice displayed by everyone else in the canyon. His wife Linda's voice echoed in his memory from their last conversation. "Jake, Whatever's been eating at you these past months, we can work through it together. You just have to trust me enough to tell me the truth." "David," Jake called out, his voice hoarse with shame, "I need to tell you something about Viktor Kozlov. He's not just buying exotic animals, he's running them through underground fighting circuits. That python would have been tortured for entertainment." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. His plan to sell Guardian hadn't just been about betraying his principles for money. It would have sentenced the gentle giant to a life of deliberate cruelty. Marcus looked down at Guardian's wounded head resting in his lap, and the python's dark eyes seemed to hold no malice, only the patient trust of a creature who understood that these humans were trying to help. "Jesus Christ," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "What kind of monster was I becoming?" Tommy reached over to grasp his father's hand, the 13-year-old's fingers surprisingly strong despite his disability. "The kind that gets a second chance, Dad." "Just like me when I thought I'd never matter again after the accident." The helicopter finally managed to lower a specialized animal transport stretcher into the canyon, its design modified for Guardian's unique size and injuries. The process of moving the python required careful coordination between Dr. Chen, Marcus, David, and 2 paramedics who rappelled down from the aircraft. Every movement had to be deliberate and gentle to avoid exacerbating Guardian's wounds. Hope's reaction to the attempted separation was immediate and heartbreaking. As the humans began lifting Guardian onto the stretcher, the young bear planted herself firmly between them and her protector, her vocalizations shifting from distressed huffs to the deep, threatening growls of an adult bear protecting her young. Despite weighing only 250 pounds compared to Guardian's 180 pounds, Hope made it clear that she would fight anyone who tried to take him away. "We can't sedate her, Doctor," Chen observed, watching Hope's defensive posture. "Her stress levels are already dangerously high, and bear physiology doesn't respond well to tranquilizers when they're in protective mode. We need her cooperation, not compliance." Dorothy's solution came from 7 decades of wisdom about stubborn creatures, both human and animal. The elderly woman began humming a lullaby she'd sung to David's father before abandoning him, a melody that carried the weight of maternal love and loss. Her voice, cracked with age and emotion, somehow reached through Hope's defensive instincts. "Come here, sugar," Dorothy called softly to the young bear. "Come see your new grandmama. I promise you, we ain't gonna separate you from your family. Not again. Not ever again." Hope's response defied everything wildlife experts understood about bear behavior around humans. The young bear approached Dorothy's wheelchair slowly, her massive head lowering until it rested gently on the elderly woman's lap. Dorothy's weathered hands stroked Hope's fur with infinite tenderness, and the bear's defensive vocalizations gradually shifted to the soft huffs of a cub seeking comfort. The transport process became a carefully choreographed dance of trust. Hope remained beside Dorothy's wheelchair, while the humans loaded Guardian onto the stretcher, but the bear's eyes never left her protector. When Guardian was finally secured for transport, Hope made a sound that none of them had heard before, a long, mournful vocalization that seemed to bridge the gap between human grief and animal sorrow. "That's goodbye," Marcus said quietly, his own eyes filling with tears. "She's saying goodbye in case he doesn't make it." Guardian's response was equally extraordinary. Despite his weakened condition, the python raised his massive head one final time to touch Hope's snout with his own, a gesture of affection and reassurance that left no doubt about the depth of their bond. The exchange was captured by news helicopters circling overhead, broadcasting the moment to millions of viewers worldwide. Tommy Webb made a decision that would change his life forever. As the helicopter prepared to lift Guardian to medical care, The 13-year-old boy announced his intention to accompany the python to the veterinary hospital. "He doesn't know any of those doctors," Tommy explained, his young voice carrying adult determination. "But he knows me now. He needs someone who understands what it's like to fight for every day you get to keep living." Marcus's initial instinct was to forbid his disabled son from taking such a risk, but Dorothy's voice cut through his parental anxiety. "Let the boy go," she said firmly. "Sometimes the best medicine ain't what comes from a pharmacy. It's knowing someone cares enough to stay with you when you're scared." The helicopter lifted off at 8:47 a.m. carrying Guardian Tommy, Dr. Chen, and 2 paramedics toward what everyone hoped would be life-saving surgery. Hope watched the aircraft disappear over the canyon ridge, her vocalizations growing increasingly distressed until Dorothy began humming her lullaby again. The remaining group in Devil's Canyon, Dorothy, David, Marcus, Patricia Martinez, and Jake Morrison, stood in the sudden silence left by the helicopter's departure. The viral video that had started everything was now approaching 10 million views, with donation pledges exceeding $2 million for wildlife conservation. But all the money in the world couldn't guarantee that Guardian would survive his injuries or that the bureaucrats wouldn't still force a separation. "David," Dorothy said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had nothing left to lose. "I'm going to tell you something I should have said 50 years ago. Being right ain't worth a damn if it costs you your family. Don't let them officials break up what love built, you hear me?" As the sun climbed higher over Devil's Canyon, casting long shadows across the battlefield where love had triumphed over violence, the real fight was just beginning. The bureaucratic machinery was already in motion, preparing to separate Hope and Guardian in the name of policy and protocol. But they hadn't counted on the stubborn determination of a family that had finally learned the true meaning of protecting what mattered most. The truth began unraveling 12 hours after Guardian's surgery, when Dr. Elena Vasquez at Montana State University's veterinary hospital made a discovery that would shake the foundations of everything the Richardson family thought they knew about Hope and Guardian's relationship. While reviewing Guardian's medical scans, she found something that changed the entire narrative of their bond. Old fractures in the python's vertebrae, consistent with severe trauma from at least 2 years prior, not 6 months. "This snake has been living with chronic pain for much longer than anyone realized," Dr. Vasquez explained to David over a crackling phone connection from the hospital. "The fractures show evidence of repeated healing and re-injury, suggesting he's been in survival mode for years, not months. And there's something else. Scarring patterns on his scales that match captivity injuries, not wild encounters." Tommy Webb sat beside Guardian's recovery enclosure in a borrowed wheelchair, his young hand pressed against the glass as the massive python lay motionless under anesthesia. The surgery had lasted 4 hours, with veterinary staff working to repair damage from wolf bites while discovering the extent of Guardian's previously hidden injuries. Tommy's presence seemed to calm the unconscious snake. His vital signs stabilized whenever the boy spoke softly about hope and their shared future. Meanwhile, back at Devil's Canyon, Dorothy Richardson was facing her own moment of reckoning. Regional Park Director William Hayes had arrived with federal wildlife officials and a court order mandating the immediate separation of Hope and Guardian. The legal documents classified their relationship as unnatural captive conditioning, requiring intervention to restore normal species behaviors. "Mrs. Richardson, I understand your emotional attachment to these animals," Director Hayes said, his bureaucratic tone completely missing the depth of what had occurred in the canyon. "But federal wildlife protocols are clear. Interspecies bonding of this nature represents a deviation from natural behavior patterns that must be corrected." Dorothy's response came from 7 decades of accumulated fury at institutional blindness. Son, I've lived long enough to watch bureaucrats destroy more families than wars ever did. You want to talk about natural behavior? Let me tell you what's natural. A mother sacrificing herself to save her child and asking someone else to finish raising that child with love. The revelation that would change everything came from an unexpected source. Patricia Martinez, Dorothy's night shift nurse, had been quietly researching Guardian's background using veterinary databases on her phone. Her discovery was both shocking and illuminating. Guardian's microchip identified him as Specimen 47, a breeding male from an illegal exotic animal operation that had been raided by federal agents 18 months earlier in Nevada. "Mrs. Richardson," Patricia said urgently, pulling up records on her phone screen, "that python wasn't wild when he met Hope. He escaped from Viktor Kozlov's breeding facility during the raid, the same Viktor Kozlov that Marcus was going to sell him back to." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Guardian hadn't just formed an unusual bond with Hope. He had actively chosen freedom with her over returning to captivity. The python's protective instincts weren't just parental. They were the desperate determination of a creature who understood exactly what kind of life awaited animals in Kozlov's operation. David felt the ground shift beneath his understanding of the entire situation. "You're telling me Guardian recognized Kozlov's name when Marcus was planning the sale? That he knew what that meant?" "Python intelligence is vastly underestimated," Dr. Sarah Chen confirmed, reviewing the database information. "They have excellent long-term memory and can recognize specific threats. Guardian would absolutely remember his captors and understand the danger of being returned to them." Marcus Webb, still processing his own near betrayal, found himself confronting a truth that made his planned actions even more horrific. He hadn't just been planning to sell Guardian for money, he had been preparing to return a torture victim to his torturers. The weight of that realization drove Marcus to his knees in the canyon dirt, his sobs echoing off the rock walls. "I didn't know," Marcus gasped between tears. "God help me, I didn't know what I was doing to him." Jake Morrison, still grappling with his own shame, placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "None of us knew the whole story. That's what makes this so complicated. We were all making decisions based on incomplete information." The federal officials weren't swayed by emotional appeals or newly discovered background information. Their orders came from Washington, where politicians were more concerned about liability and public relations than individual animal welfare. Hope would be relocated to a bear rehabilitation facility in Colorado, while Guardian would be transferred to the National Zoo's Reptile Research Program in Washington, D.C. "These animals will receive excellent care in appropriate facilities," Director Hayes insisted, his clipboard of official documents providing bureaucratic armor against human appeals. "The current arrangement is unsuitable for both species' long-term welfare." Dorothy's response revealed the steel core that had sustained her through 7 decades of hardship. "Excellent care," she repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. "You mean like the excellent care that left Guardian tortured in Kozlov's facility? Or the excellent care that would have separated a mother from her child based on species rather than love?" At the veterinary hospital, Tommy Webb was witnessing Guardian's first conscious moments since surgery. The python's eyes opened slowly, immediately scanning his surroundings for threats before focusing on the young boy's face. Tommy leaned forward in his wheelchair, his voice soft but certain. "Hey there, big guy. Hope's okay. She's safe with my family, and we're not going to let anybody separate you two. I promise." Guardian's response was subtle but unmistakable to trained observers. The python's head moved slightly toward Tommy's voice, and his breathing pattern shifted to the relaxed rhythm that snakes exhibit around trusted companions. Dr. Vasquez noted the change in her medical records, documenting the first evidence of Guardian's ability to form therapeutic bonds with humans. Back in Devil's Canyon, the standoff escalated when Hope demonstrated her own understanding of the situation. As federal agents prepared tranquilizer equipment to facilitate her capture, the young bear did something that stunned everyone present. She approached Dorothy's wheelchair and sat down beside it, placing her massive paw gently on the elderly woman's lap. "Well, I'll be damned," Dorothy whispered, her weathered hand coming to rest on Hope's paw. "She knows they're trying to take her away from her family, and she's asking for protection." The gesture was captured by news crews and immediately broadcast worldwide. The image of a 250-pound bear seeking comfort from a 75-year-old woman in a wheelchair became an instant symbol of trust transcending species boundaries. Social media exploded with support for keeping Hope and Guardian together, with hashtags like #Don'tSeparateFamily trending globally within minutes. Director Hayes found himself facing unexpected resistance from his own team. Several federal agents refused to tranquilize Hope while she was demonstrating calm, trusting behavior toward Dorothy. Their supervisor, Agent Rebecca Torres, had 20 years of wildlife enforcement experience and recognized something unprecedented in Hope's actions. "Sir, that bear is exhibiting attachment behaviors toward a human caregiver," Agent Torres observed. "Standard protocols require psychological evaluation before forced relocation when animals demonstrate this level of human bonding. The psychological evaluation came from an unexpected source." Dr. James Whitehorse, a renowned animal behaviorist from the University of Colorado, had been monitoring the viral video situation and drove through the night to reach Devil's Canyon. His arrival shifted the dynamic of the entire confrontation. "I've studied interspecies bonding for 30 years, Dr. Whitehorse announced to the assembled officials and media crews. "What we're witnessing here represents the most significant case of cross-species family formation ever documented. Separating these animals now would be tantamount to psychological torture for both of them." Director Hayes attempted to maintain bureaucratic authority in the face of mounting scientific opposition. "Dr. Whitehorse, federal protocols don't allow for exceptions based on emotional attachment. These animals must be relocated to appropriate facilities regardless of their current behavioral patterns." Dorothy Richardson chose that moment to reveal the truth she'd been hiding for 3 years. "David, honey, come here. There's something I need to tell you about why your daddy really left home all those years ago." The revelation that followed would rewrite the Richardson family history. Dorothy's voice carried across the canyon as she explained how David's father hadn't abandoned the family. He had been forced out by federal bureaucrats who declared his wildlife research illegal and threatened him with prosecution unless he ceased contact with his family. "Your daddy was studying animal intelligence, specifically whether creatures could form emotional bonds across species lines," Dorothy continued, her eyes never leaving David's face. "The government didn't want that research published because it would complicate too many wildlife management policies, so they gave him a choice: stop his work and disappear, or watch his family suffer the consequences." The parallel to their current situation was unmistakable. Once again, federal authorities were prioritizing policy over truth, bureaucracy over love, institutional control over individual welfare. The cycle that had destroyed David's father was preparing to destroy Hope and Guardian. Tommy's voice cut through the tension via David's radio, broadcasting from Guardian's recovery room. "Dad, Uncle David, Guardian's awake, and Dr. Vasquez says he's asking for Hope. He keeps making this sound that sounds like her name." The sound Tommy described was captured by hospital microphones and transmitted across the canyon's speaker system. Guardian's vocalization was unlike anything the experts had heard from pythons. a soft, rhythmic huffing that closely matched the comfort sounds Hope made when content. The snake was calling for his adopted daughter in her own language. Hope's response was immediate and heartbreaking. The young bear rose from beside Dorothy's wheelchair and began vocalizing back, her calls carrying across the canyon with desperate urgency. She was answering Guardian's summons, trying to bridge the 40-mile distance between them with pure emotional force. The federal agents looked at each other uncertainly as the exchange continued, Hope's distress becoming more pronounced with each of Guardian's recorded calls. Agent Torres stepped forward, her voice thick with conflict between duty and conscience. "Sir, I've never seen anything like this in 20 years of wildlife enforcement. These animals are demonstrating communication patterns that suggest genuine emotional attachment. Forcing separation under these circumstances might violate federal animal welfare guidelines." Director Hayes found himself caught between competing pressures. Political orders from Washington demanding swift resolution, scientific evidence suggesting unprecedented animal behavior, and growing public opinion supporting the animals' right to remain together. The viral video had now reached 15 million views, with celebrities, politicians, and animal rights organizations weighing in on the controversy. As the sun began setting over Devil's Canyon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that matched the flames that had first brought Hope and Guardian together, the battle lines were drawn. On one side stood the forces of bureaucratic protocol and institutional authority. On the other stood an unlikely alliance of a broken family learning to love again, two animals whose bond challenged everything humans thought they knew about nature, and millions of people around the world who recognized something sacred in the connection between a bear and a snake who had chosen each other as family. The war for Hope and Guardian's future was about to begin, and the stakes were higher than anyone imagined. This wasn't just about two animals anymore. It was about the fundamental question of whether love could triumph over law, whether truth could overcome policy, and whether the bonds of chosen family were strong enough to withstand the full force of governmental opposition. The viral video that had started as simple footage of animals in distress had become a global phenomenon that questioned the very nature of family, love, and the courage required to protect both against impossible odds. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the viral video that changed everything, Dorothy Richardson sat in her custom wheelchair overlooking the Hope Guardian Memorial Sanctuary, watching her great-grandson Tommy demonstrate his remarkable recovery to a group of visiting school children. The boy who had been told he would never walk again was now taking careful steps with his leg braces, his gait unsteady but determined, his voice strong as he explained the bond between the sanctuary's most famous residents. "See how Hope waits for Guardian to catch up?" Tommy pointed toward the sprawling enclosure where the young bear, now weighing 400 pounds and visibly pregnant with her first cub, moved slowly alongside her python companion. Guardian, his scales bearing faint scars from their canyon battle, but his movements fluid and confident, kept pace with Hope's deliberate waddle. "That's what family does. We adjust our speed so nobody gets left behind." The sanctuary itself was a testament to what love and determination could accomplish when backed by public support and private funding. The viral video had eventually reached 50 million views across all platforms, generating over $2 million in donations that transformed a struggling wildlife preserve into a world-class research facility dedicated to studying interspecies relationships. Dorothy's inheritance had provided the foundation, but it was the global outpouring of support that built something extraordinary. David Richardson, now 46 and serving as the sanctuary's director, stood beside his grandmother with his arm around his wife, Sarah Chen Richardson, their own 6-month-old daughter sleeping peacefully in a carrier against Sarah's chest. The couple had married 8 months after the canyon confrontation, their wedding ceremony held in the same clearing where Hope and Guardian had first been rescued, with both animals serving as honored witnesses. "You know what I love most about this place?" Dorothy asked, her voice still strong despite the cancer that had been held at bay for longer than any doctor had predicted. "It's that we finally figured out that different don't mean wrong, and family don't mean perfect." Marcus Webb approached their group with a broad smile, his park ranger uniform crisp and professional. His transformation from bitter hunter to passionate conservationist had been the most dramatic character evolution of the entire story. After completing his prison sentence for illegal hunting activities, reduced to community service due to his cooperation with authorities, Marcus had thrown himself into wildlife protection with the same intensity he'd once devoted to revenge. "Tommy, your physical therapist called," Marcus announced to his son. "Dr. Martinez says your progress is exceeding all expectations. She thinks you might be ready for advanced mobility training by Christmas." Tommy beamed at the news, his confidence growing daily along with his physical abilities. The experimental nerve stimulation treatments, funded by viral video donations, had restored partial sensation to his legs and significant improvement in his mobility. More importantly, his role as Guardian's primary human companion had given him purpose and self-worth that transcended his disability. "Dad, did you tell them about the documentary crew coming next week?" Tommy asked excitedly. "National Geographic wants to film Guardian and Hope teaching the new baby bear cub how to trust humans. It's going to be the first time anyone's ever recorded interspecies parenting behaviors in real time." The new baby was a 3-month-old black bear cub named Courage, orphaned in a car accident and brought to the sanctuary when traditional rehabilitation methods failed. The cub had been traumatized and refused human contact until Hope and Guardian intervened, essentially adopting him into their unusual family unit. Watching Hope teach Courage to interact safely with humans while Guardian provided security and comfort had amazed behavioral scientists worldwide. Patricia Martinez, Dorothy's former nurse who had become the sanctuary's medical coordinator, joined their group with an update that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Mrs. Richardson, the latest test results came back from your oncologist. The cancer markers are still undetectable. Dr. Williams says he's never seen anything like it in a patient your age." Dorothy chuckled, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Honey, I told that doctor from the beginning I wasn't about to die until I saw my family whole again. Apparently, sheer stubbornness is better medicine than chemotherapy." The truth was more complex and beautiful than Dorothy's joke suggested. Her cancer remission had coincided with her emotional healing, the resolution of 50 years of guilt and regret providing a psychological boost that complemented her medical treatments. More importantly, her daily purpose, helping oversee the sanctuary and watching her fractured family rebuild itself, had given her reasons to fight that extended far beyond mere survival. Jake Morrison, who had served 18 months in federal prison for his role in the corruption scheme, now worked as the sanctuary's security chief. His gambling addiction was 5 months in remission, supported by weekly counseling sessions and the stable income that allowed him to provide for his family without desperation. His wife Linda had forgiven his betrayals, but it was his daughter's admiration for his transformation that truly motivated his continued recovery. "The perimeter sensors picked up that wolf pack again last night," Jake reported to David. "Same group that attacked Hope and Guardian last year. They're keeping their distance, but they seem to be watching the sanctuary with interest." "Maybe they're learning something too," David suggested, his ranger instincts always alert to wildlife behavior patterns. "The sanctuary's success has changed predator-prey dynamics in this entire region. Other species are adapting to the idea that this area represents safety rather than hunting grounds." Dr. James Whitehorse, the animal behaviorist whose intervention had helped save Hope and Guardian from forced separation, was putting the finishing touches on his groundbreaking research paper about their relationship. His findings had already revolutionized academic understanding of animal intelligence and emotional capacity, with implications that extended far beyond wildlife management into human psychology and family therapy. The data we've collected here over the past year has overturned 50 years of assumptions about animal behavior, Dr. Whitehorse explained to a visiting journalist. Hope and Guardian have demonstrated that love, loyalty, and family bonds transcend not just species boundaries, but our entire understanding of what animals are capable of feeling and expressing. The anniversary celebration was interrupted by an unexpected arrival that brought the story full circle. A black SUV pulled into the sanctuary parking lot, and Viktor Kozlov emerged in handcuffs flanked by federal agents. The exotic animal trafficker, recently convicted on multiple charges of animal cruelty and illegal wildlife trade, had requested to see Guardian as part of a plea agreement requiring him to provide information about other trafficking operations. The reunion between Guardian and his former captor was brief but profound. The massive python, now healthy and confident in his sanctuary home, showed no fear or aggression toward Kozlov. Instead, Guardian's behavior suggested something more powerful than revenge: indifference. The snake had moved beyond his traumatic past to embrace a future built on love and security. "He doesn't even recognize me," Kozlov said quietly, his voice hollow with the realization that his cruelty had been forgotten in favor of healing. "I destroyed so many animals' lives, but he's found peace anyway." Agent Rebecca Torres, who had become a frequent sanctuary visitor and strong supporter of Hope and Guardian's bond, escorted Kozlov away with a final observation that resonated with everyone present. "Sometimes the best justice is watching victims thrive in spite of what was done to them. Guardian's happiness is worth more than any prison sentence we could give you." As evening approached and the anniversary crowd began to disperse, the Richardson family gathered around Hope and Guardian's enclosure for their daily sunset ritual. Hope lay contentedly on her side, her pregnant belly visible as Guardian coiled nearby in protective watchfulness. Their 3 adopted cubs, Courage and 2 others who had joined their unusual family, played nearby under the watchful eyes of both surrogate parents. Dorothy reached through the fence to stroke Hope's massive paw, the same gesture that had first established trust between them a year ago. "You know what I learned from all this, sugar. Family ain't about perfect people making perfect choices. It's about broken people choosing to love each other anyway, even when the world tells them it's impossible." Tommy leaned against his father's shoulder, both of them watching Guardian gently guide one of the cubs away from the fence with patient redirection rather than force. "Dad, do you think they know how famous they are? How many people they've inspired?" Marcus smiled, his arm tightening around his son's shoulders. "I think they know something more important than fame, son. They know they're loved, they're safe, and they're home. Everything else is just noise." As the sun set over the Hope Guardian Memorial Sanctuary, casting golden light across the enclosures where impossible families thrived under human protection, Dorothy Richardson felt a peace she hadn't experienced in 75 years. Her legacy wasn't the money she'd accumulated or the years she'd wasted in regret. It was this place where love transcended species, where broken creatures learned to trust again, and where the bonds of chosen family proved stronger than any obstacle the world could create. The viral video that had started everything continued to inspire millions of people worldwide, but its greatest achievement was visible every evening in a Montana sanctuary, where a bear, a python, and their adopted cubs settled down for the night, watched over by humans who had learned that the most important things in life couldn't be captured on camera. They could only be felt in the heart. Sometimes the most beautiful families aren't born, they're forged in fire, wrapped in love and sealed with sacrifice. As Dorothy Richardson discovered at 75, it's never too late to heal a broken family or witness miracles that challenge everything we thought we knew about love. When a bear and python chose each other as family after tragedy, they taught 3 generations of humans what it means to never give up on those we care about. Dorothy's story reminds us that our greatest regrets can become our most powerful motivations, and the years we think we've wasted might actually be preparing us for our most important moments. Her stubborn determination to reunite her fractured family, inspired by watching 2 unlikely creatures protect each other against impossible odds, proved that love doesn't have an expiration date, and it's never too late to say, "I'm sorry," or "I love you." The sanctuary that emerged from their story became more than a wildlife preserve. It became a testament to the truth that sometimes we have to lose everything to discover what really matters. In your own life, what broken relationships might still have hope for healing? What would you risk to protect the family bonds that matter most? Share your thoughts. What family relationship in your life deserves a second chance? Have you ever witnessed love triumph over impossible circumstances?